this video, I'll be talking about the top 8 mistakes you're making with your registered savings account that will prevent you from growing your funds effectively, or ultimately would prevent you from attaining the millionaire mark early, or even attaining financial independence early. Hey everyone, this is Ebuka from the Finance Wiz channel. If this is your first time in this channel, thanks for joining, and I assure you that you're going to get a lot of gems and value from this video. Please feel free to like, subscribe and share with your friends so they can also enjoy the value that you're going to be getting from it. If you have been on this channel before and you've watched my previous video, I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and I just want to encourage you to also click on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my subsequent gems or videos I'll be dropping later. So you may ask me, what are registered savings accounts? Very simple. They could actually be savings or investment accounts where the funds in it are not subjected to tax. In other words, they are government approved way to shelter your funds from tax or to defer your tax payment on certain funds till the future. So there are several types of registered savings accounts like the TFSA, RRSP, FHSA and many more. If you want to know more details about this account and how it works, just check out my previous video. Now let's dive deep into our subject matter for the day. So the first mistake I've seen a lot of people make is when they use their registered savings account for savings only. Yes, I understand it's called savings account, but there are actually many things you can use it for. You can actually use it for investment in bonds, in ETFs, in stocks and many more. Now, when you use it for just savings, you lose out on opportunity for compounding interest from investments. In 2020, a BMO survey that was done reflected that the average TFSA account had about 38% in cash, which is a large sum of money just sitting down in the bank account. Now, the funny thing about this survey, which I found interesting, is that although 73% of Canadians knew about the TFSA, less than 50% knew that they could actually use it for investment purposes. That's very worrisome. So if you have your registered savings account today and you're using it only for savings or just keeping cash in it, I would recommend that you actually use the funds for investment purposes. Please reach out to your financial advisors for guidance on this. So the second mistake I've also seen is that some people are not aware that they can actually have multiple registered savings accounts with different financial institutions. Now, even some people that are aware, you find out that they are unable to track or they are ineffectively tracking all their RRSPs, all their TFSAs to ensure they don't over-contribute beyond the limit that was established. Now, this is a problem. So if you have 10 TFSA accounts, all you need to do is sum up all the funds in each of these accounts and ensure that the funds don't exceed your contribution room for the year. In the case of TFSA, for instance, if you were to contribute above the contribution limit, you'll be charged a penalty of 1% of the excess amount in that month. So the third mistake I've also seen that's very prevalent is when people want to set up a new registered savings account with a different financial institution and try to move funds from one account to another. Now, the actual mistake they make is withdrawing the funds from their previous TFSA account and manually depositing the funds into the new account. Now, that's going to be reflected as double contribution. So you don't want that to happen to avoid getting penalized for over contribution. So the fourth mistake I've also seen that's very common is when people withdraw funds from their TFSA and recontribute that same amount to their TFSA. I'll give an example. If you had $10,000 in your TFSA and you were to withdraw $5,000 in your TFSA and you try to recontribute the $5,000 thinking that it's going to add up to $10,000, well, you're wrong. The reason is that whatever recontribution to that account will be regarded as new contribution. So in this case, rather than a $10,000, it becomes a $15,000 contribution. And of course, if you had a contribution limit of $10,000, it means that you'll be charged 1% on the $5,000. So the next mistake I've seen that's also very common is people using their TFSA accounts for the purpose of trading or aggressive investments. Now, CRA significantly frowns at this because for them, the purpose of the TFSA account is just an investment account that will be held for the long term and not a day trading account. So if you're using your TFSA account for numerous transactions that is more than the average transaction frequency, there is a likelihood that CRA will be subjecting you to tax. In other words, the income gained from those transactions might end up being taxed. Now, just so you know, if you think that this has happened in the past and it's all gone, well, in 2018, CRA started a process for recovering funds of about $110 million in unpaid tax arising from audits that were done for previous years. And these audits were simply focused on those that use their TFSA for high trading frequency. So typically I would recommend that you actually avoid this as much as possible, because if you continue, there's a likelihood that all your dividends, your gains, and incomes that have been earned from these transactions would end up being subjected to tax. So there are quite a number of factors that CRA uses to determine if your TFSA account has been used for trading purposes or frequent transactions. Number one is the most obvious, which is the transaction frequency, if it's occurring more than the usual expectation. Number two is financing. 3, time spent. And of course, the last one is the market knowledge. So the sixth mistake I've also seen is when people become non-residents of Canada and still keep contributing to their registered savings plan. Now, when you continue to contribute to your TFSA account when you're a non-resident, there is a high likelihood that you'll be getting a 1% penalty for doing that. Also, when you withdraw the funds from those TFSA or registered savings account, you'll be subjected to foreign tax, which you wouldn't want. So the seventh mistake I've also seen, which is also common, is when people don't convert their RRSP to RRIF, Registered Retirement Income Funds, when they turn 71. Now it's a requirement for you to actually do that. Now, if you don't do that when you turn 71, your whole RRSP funds will be paid out as cash and treated as income, which is going to be heavy on you. So the last and most important factor, which I know is the most neglected for many people, is understanding the impact of the fluctuations, or I'll say loss and gains, in your investments on your future contribution limits. So just to remind you, only the amount you withdraw in a year can be recontributed in a subsequent year. Again, unfortunately, whatever capital loss realized in your TFSA or any registered savings account, unfortunately, you cannot claim that as part of your tax credit, and you cannot use that to reduce any other taxable gains. So I'll be giving you some examples to help you understand the impact of gains or losses in your investment account or your TFSA account on your contribution limits in the future. So let's assume you had a $5,000 contribution into your TFSA account, and that value drops to $4,000, and you withdraw the $4,000 for the year. Now you can only contribute that $4,000 back into your TFSA. That simply implies that your $1,000 difference has been completely lost, because you can only contribute whatever you've withdrawn. So that contribution limit is gone forever. Also, on the other hand, if that $5,000 had increased to $6,000 and you withdrew the $6,000, it actually means that you can contribute the $6,000, which means that you have gained a $1,000 limit above your contribution. So if you're planning to withdraw from your TFS account in the short term, ensure to consider the impact of these fluctuations or changes in the amount you have on your future contribution limit before you make that withdrawal. So the second example I'll be giving was an occurrence in 2021 where an individual had over-contributed to his TFSA account. Unfortunately, the company he invested in went bankrupt. Of course, as a result of that bankruptcy, the value of his investment becomes zero automatically. Now, there's an over-contribution amount which the CRA has already recorded. Now, the question to the CRA was, how would the individual be able to withdraw the excess contribution above the limit that has been approved? So the CRA clearly established the fact that if the individual does not have the ability to withdraw that amount or that excess contribution, then they also don't have the power to waive that excess contribution penalty. So what that implies is that as long as the individual does not have that contribution limit to reduce the excess TFSA contribution, the individual will always continue to be taxed on that over contribution. Now, this can be a very challenging situation depending on how much he had invested in that company. Now, the person might have to wait several years before he can get the contribution limit enough to reduce to the limit that has been established. So in conclusion, I would recommend that you completely avoid over-contribution as much as possible. Now, if you combine an over-contribution with a bad investment, then there's a big problem for you. I hope you enjoyed the tips I gave in this video, and I hope you found them very useful. If you are doing any of these things, as much as possible, try to avoid them and correct your ways as quickly as possible. Luckily, I think CRA can be sometimes fair if it's your first time or if it was done in an error. However, if you have been penalized and you think that the mistake you made was an error, you can always write a mail to CRA just informing them that it was, and provide enough evidences to reflect that it was actually an error. And if you're lucky, those penalties can be waived. Thank you, and see you at the next video. Bye.